Welcome back, hobby acolytes. Inquisitor Nero here, and today we will be examining how to paint Horus Heresy Iron Warriors. Okay, so what you do is you prime the model, whip out your favorite color of silver, stick it on a base, and you're done. Thanks for watching. Bye! But if we don't want our model to suck, we're gonna have to get our hands dirty. Roll the title card. But before we begin, be sure to like the video and sub to the channel. Also, do check out my support links such as Patreon, Subscribestar, yada yada yada. Links are all in the description below. Your support allows me to do more videos where I could rant about 3D printed toy soldiers in power armor. But seriously, if you do choose to support the channel, I cannot express my thanks enough, you beautiful hobby heroes, you. Okay, shilling complete. Moving on. Here is our infamous Iron Warrior. As always, thanks is in order to Paul Friedrich for an amazing sculpt and Legion 14 Guy for the head swap. I have linked both artists below so that you could support their work and give them some love. I did some additional conversion work that I won't bore you with, but I wanted to get as close to what I believe your typical Iron Warrior Legionary looks like. More on that subject later. Now, as I stated earlier, we want an Iron Warrior that stands out from the crowd, even if he's a lowly lineman. So, let's look at our paints needed to address the metallic armor. Now let's get the rest of the paints. You're probably saying to yourself, Nero, you're either crazy or a masochist. And while one of those statements is true, this isn't as daunting as a task as it looks. Boy, try saying that 3 times fast. I do want to take a moment to backtrack to a question I get asked a lot about 3D printed miniatures regarding those pesky scan lines. No! Yes, they do happen from time to time, even with my Mars 3 4K monochrome LCD DVD PVP screen. A lot does depend on the miniature itself. Some are more prone to them than others. When they do appear, you can do a couple of things to get rid of them. 1. Ignore them. With all the primer, paint, and whatnot you're slapping on these models, they typically disappear completely. This is usually what I do. Number 2, if you are more paranoid about them than Dale Gribble is about the US government, then prior to priming, you can paint a thin, let me say it again, thin layer of liquid latex on the model. I don't have much experience with this technique, so please do some research yourself. There's some bigger terrain pieces I will be trying this on in the future, but that experiment is for another video. Third, and lastly, you could use products such as liquid green stuff to fill in the lines. I actually had to do this on this model's helmet because while I was painting him, he started to look like he had taken a gunshot to the dome. But with a little liquid green stuff, a little brush on black primer, and a reapplication of the metallics, and it's gone. Moral of the story is, do not let this deter you from getting into 3D printing. This is a 3D printer's version of mold lines. And I, for one, find it far less time-consuming dealing with scan lines than mold lines, which absolutely suck. Sometimes I will intentionally keep scan lines visible on metallic armored miniatures because it looks like Damascus steel. And let's be honest, this can be a technically challenging hobby. If you are new to 3D printing and your friends are giving you for scan lines when you have a beautifully painted mini, get some new friends. Okay, let's paint this thing before this turns into 5 hours of heresy. Confessions of a 3D printer. I started out with a coat of Vallejo, or Vallejo's, black metal. This came from the recommendation of everyone's favorite speed painter, Guy, from Midwinter Minis, specifically his Death Guard video. Thanks, Guy. You've probably seen his video, but for the noobs in the audience, I'll link it in the description. Midwinter Minis is a great resource for painting tips, so check him out. Right, back to the mini. I then stippled on Army Painter's gunmetal up to Army Painter's plate metal, getting progressively lighter and focusing on which surfaces would catch the most amount of light on the model. Now for the special part. Using a mix of 1 parts Achelian green, these names GW, and 5 parts contrast medium, I did an all-over wash of the model while pulling in the wash to the shadowed areas of the miniature. I then went back with a light Nuln Oil wash and sparingly stippled back some of the Army Painter plate metal. I call this recipe Cold Steel. This works as a nice contrast to the warm bronze and yellow Iron Warrior's caution striping I'll be adding in later. I will go into greater detail about this recipe in an upcoming video where I feature Bisteria Miniatures models from their Penitent Crusade line. I'm still perfecting the recipe at current, but I'm happy with what I'm able to achieve. Mixing warm and cold tones in something even as simple as metallic armor makes for a more visually interesting model. So next project, challenge yourself. See what color combinations you can come up with. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to represent your average Iron Warrior with this model. Some of the astute heresy junkies in the audience may be asking themselves, why is this Iron Warrior in Mark II Crusade armor rather than Mark III armor?
Warning, warning, warning.
This is a highly debated topic. That is because I, and others, believe that the Iron Warriors Legion preferred Mark II Crusade plate over Mark III Iron plate. Most hobbyists have this notion that Mark III Iron armor equals Iron Warriors. People forget about other legions that had greater access to Forge Worlds and Mechanicum assets, such as the Iron Hands or the Salamanders. Additionally, Mark III Iron Armor is typically seen amongst Legion Breacher squads due to the nature of the close quarters fighting these units encounter. But what is often overlooked is that the Imperial Fists were the first ones to write the book on Breacher squad tactics. They were so successful at prosecuting this type of warfare that it impressed the Primarch Horus Lupercal. He was so impressed that he started adopting these breacher tactics into his own legion, the then Luna Wolves, latterly known as, you guessed it, the Sons of Horus. Iron Warriors are known to be extremely pragmatic, rigid, and efficient in their temperament and outlook. At its core, Mark III Iron Armor is a Mark II Crusade armor variant that provides much of its protection to the front of the wearer while sacrificing protection from behind the wearer. Mark II plate gives the wearer a much more even field of protection. Additionally, Mark III armor is noted as being somewhat difficult to repair and maintain, while Mark II was extremely versatile and is actually considered to be one of the most efficient armor marks even in the 40k setting.
Not only is that practical, it is just badass.
Siege warfare, which was a hallmark of the Iron Warriors, relies on massive artillery barrages, trench warfare, and charging from small gaps in the enemy defenses into open terrain. It requires the most efficient and versatile tool for the job, which is Mark II. While the Iron Warriors did have favorable relationships with many different Forge Worlds and the Mechanicum of Mars, they were constantly on campaign fighting extremely costly conflicts at the edge of Imperial space. The Legion itself is noted as having to constantly induct new recruits to replenish their high losses. If this was the case, they would have needed to give fresh recruits an easy-to-maintain armor and weapon loadout, and due to the Legion's pragmatism, they would have certainly adopted a one-size-fits-all solution. Now, it is worth noting that yes, the Iron Warriors did have access to Mark III, without a doubt. However, the legions of the Horus Heresy had preferred fighting styles and thus preferred armor marks. The Iron Hands, Death Guard, Imperial Fists, and Salamanders were all Mark III respectors, while the Iron Warriors, much like the Dark Angels, would have preferred Mark II. Both legions also had a similar character, if that makes any sense. I've done some extensive research on the subject, and the novels, Black Books, and Iron Warriors-specific Forge World releases all seem to point to Mark II as being the preferred armor of the Legion. Anyway, comment below with your thoughts. What side of the argument are you on? Mark II or Mark III? One thing that I love about this Legion is that they are the closest to your average World War I soldier. They fought in brutal campaigns that no one else wanted to fight in. These are bitter men fighting in grim theaters of war. They don't seek glory in their campaigns, but see it as another job that they just have to get on and do. There's a nobility about that stoic temperament that is inspiring, much like the men of old that fought in the trenches of World War I. Side note, go watch the documentary They Shall Not Grow Old. It's mind-blowing and very moving. Okay, enough with Nero's movie suggestions. Let's see our completed trench fighter. Doesn't do him justice if I'm being honest, but I'm stoked on the outcome regardless. Even with the added cold steel recipe, this model was quick to paint. If you're a new Heresy player and you're looking for a Legion with a fairly straightforward painting scheme, give these guys a glance. Well, we finally made it to the end of more like 10 minutes of Heresy. Hopefully the next video will actually be closer to 5 minutes. Speaking of which, let me check my notes here to see what Legion is next. And it is... oh boy. Gonna need a new title for the series at this rate. Before I go, I want to give a special thanks to narrator extraordinaire and fellow YouTuber Vox in the Void. He's giving my little broadcast here a shout, which is an honor. He's got a great channel with incredible content to listen to, especially while you do your painting. Thanks, Vox. I'm truly humbled. Well, with that, I've been your host, Nero. Happy heresy, everyone. Connect with me on social media, and remember, iron within, iron without.